Today, South Africa is that much bigger by volume, population, size of economy compared to Malawi. To achieve equity and balance, have we got instruments, capacities, and resources for the region to develop together in equity and balance to mitigate the disparities among us? Those were the questions we confronted in 1980 at the formation of the organization. Are they questions we still confront today, 40 years down the road? If I follow President Mukapa's presentation this morning, it suggests we're still confronting those issues. But to your question, sir, I was privileged to serve SADC through 3 phases. It was the formative years. I was the first substantive executive secretary of SADC because my predecessor died 6 months after he was appointed. So we went through establishment, first 5 years to get the organization running, a modest secretariat of 13 people, and a much bigger number of people operating in SADC in the member states because we operated under the decentralized sectoral coordination structure. After establishment, we consolidated the coordination activities that we were pursuing at the time, mainly transport and communications, energy, agriculture, and food security. And then we went through the 3rd phase of transformation from the coordination conference to the community. In fact, bringing out the Windhoek Treaty and its approval in 1992 was among the last activities that I executed as Executive Secretary of SADC. Whether they are achievements or not, I leave for you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makoni. Professor Newkirk, in his address, former President Mukapa emphasized, made it very clear that SADC stands out among the regional blocs in Africa for having been very successful in ensuring peace and security and addressing the crisis that did arise from one country or the other. So in your own opinion, what are the major challenges or the key issues that needs to be addressed in order to consolidate and strengthen our peace and security in the region?
Thanks, facilitator, for the question. And let me start off by thanking the organizers, Ngozi Institute and the SADC Secretariat, for the invitation and the warm hospitality in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I also want to thank the band for leading us into those 3 anthems. And I want to propose to SADC, to Dr. Tax, that in future we make use of choirs to sing the anthems and teach us the words. It'll add color to the event. So it's true that the keynote speaker said that in terms of peace and security, SADC is a success story. I can hardly disagree with him because he's sitting right next to me. So I find myself in a pickle, but allow me, as a professor should do, to interrogate that statement and see what we can learn. And so, indeed, it is true that the AU and SADC has developed over time very sophisticated policy frameworks and strategies to deal with democracy promotion and threats to security. I think the audience knows them. They go by names such as APSA, or AGA, or SIPO. And indeed, SADC enjoys relative peace relative to the rest of the continent. But peace must surely be more than the absence of war. Positive peace must include justice for all. And so, are these policy instruments robust enough to ensure positive peace for, is it 230 million citizens of SADC? Consider the contours of our volatile world. This is what we're up against. Let me start globally, on the global scale. As you know, we observe seismic shocks with damaging consequences. The first one I think of is economic vulnerabilities. And the major trend that I see is the globalization of the world economy and growing political nationalism, which you spoke about, President. So we have a slowdown in global economic growth, a rise in global debt, and rising inequality between and within countries. Under this rubric, we also see rising major power tensions. Again, you alluded to that. Think of America and China and the emerging or deepening trade war. Think of the tense relationship between America under the Trump administration and the European Union. Think of the challenges to the European Union integration project itself. Think of resurgent Russia and the role of China. These things play off or play out in the Security Council of the United Nations and elsewhere. And as a consequence, multilateralism is weakening, which impacts negatively on democracy and conflict management and resolution. We are not agreed on how to deal with Yemen or Syria or Somalia or the DRC. Secondly, I see environmental risks where the major trend is, to put it simply, extreme weather and the failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation. One result is acute food insecurity. Another result is the struggle or the challenge to manage natural disasters. And you will recall the cyclone Idai that hit Mozambique and parts of Zimbabwe and Malawi a few months ago. A real challenge to our capability to respond. The third one is technological instability, where the trend is new instabilities that are being caused by the deepening integration of digital technologies with every aspect of life. And the simple example to use from where I sit in Johannesburg, I have a smartphone, you have one too. I do my banking on a smartphone app. I don't go to the branch. As a consequence, in my country, hundreds of people are being laid off now in the financial sector. They've become redundant. The teller is no longer needed. So the impact of the 4IR is upon us. We have to mitigate and adapt. I see two other consequences of technological instability. The first one is the vulnerability of critical technological infrastructure, which is a growing national security concern. So we face cyber threats increasingly. And the second one is artificial intelligence, AI, enables the rise of media echo chambers and fake news. Popularized by the President of America, who's conducting his foreign policy through tweets. Did you know that tweets that contain fake news consistently outperform those containing true information? So if you're a student or a consumer of these technologies, beware, be careful. Let me come to Africa, the continent. I would say that despite our best efforts, conflicts continue to ravage Africa. The causes are multiple, complex, and interrelated. For example, the AU Commission last year acknowledged that conflict and crises are rooted in governance deficits, which include mismanagement of diversity, manipulation of constitutions, marginalization of the youth, and mismanagement of natural resources. In addition, conflict is fueled by at least 7 or more factors, including poverty and instability, disruptive transitions to democracy, a lack of democratic accountability, social and economic exclusion, large-scale violence, self-serving leadership, and excessive dependence on commodity exports, you mentioned this, President, and external funding for running the state and managing the economy. So, where does this leave us? There's much to be said that is positive. For example, if you look at the most recent Mo Ibrahim Index of Governance, you will find that only 4 of the 16 member states in SADC dip below the African average in terms of overall governance. And in fact, the most recent Africa Governance report of the APRM, our own peer review tool, the African peer review mechanism, recommends member states to sign, ratify, and domesticate relevant peace and security instruments. Remember, I started off by mentioning them, APSA, etc., etc. And as important as these instruments are, is it enough? And in conclusion, I want to recommend some additional measures. First, I've got 5. First, review the SADC peace and security architecture in the light of these identified trends. There's a process underway, and I think they need to take into account those most recent, over-the-horizon, emerging threats to our sovereignty, to our well-being. Secondly, pay particular attention to the capacity of our member states to anticipate and respond individually and collectively to these challenges. This requires, in my view, a regional, homegrown security sector review program supported by the Secretariat. The third one, rather than relying on external consultants, draw on indigenous African expertise in peace and security. This is an underrated or under-evaluated, undervalued relationship that we can improve on. My fourth recommendation is for SADC is create a research unit or a policy analysis unit in the Secretariat, perhaps at senior level, where its purpose will be to facilitate the generation and the dissemination of new knowledge. Because as you've heard me say, the threats to our peace and security are very broad, wide, and deep. It's more than hard security. And then finally, allow me to say, facilitator, there's no point in us chasing big, elite, or state-driven projects if our people do not see relevance to their lives. This is true for APSA and for SIPO and our policy instruments as well. National and regional security must promote the interests of our people It's as simple as that. If our plans do not address poverty alleviation, inequality, and exclusion, SADC will fail. The challenge is clear. SADC needs a social compact with the people of the region to continue the journey towards the ultimate goal, which is freedom from want and freedom from fear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Mr. Terry, the keynote speaker did highlight the role of the private sector and address the issues of partnerships with governments and other players to make the mission and vision of SADC possible. So what do you think are the constraints that the private sector faces in enhancing and deepening its role in building this integration? And what can SADC and the member states do to enable the private sector to fulfill its integration role?
Thank you very much, moderator. Maybe before going into that, I'd like to appreciate a very powerful and very informative lecture by Your Excellency President Mkapa, and as well as my sincere appreciation to the organizers, Uongozi Institute, the SADC Secretariat, and the University of Dar es Salaam. And thank you very much for putting me on the spot, because you have put me in a stage with everyone who has dedicated their lives and career to the development in SADC. Then you invited someone who was not even born when SADC was operational. But 4 key points. I think the key pain points for the private sector are infrastructure, skills, and to a large extent, the issue of quality employment. You have an issue of finance, which is caused by savings. And the last bit that I'll talk about is fairness. And infrastructure, I'll just give you one particular example. It costs around $4,000 to transport 1 container of tobacco from Malawi to the port of Nacala by road. But if you have a very functioning railway within the same distance, you'd transport the same container for around $1,800, $2,000, which is 50% sort of cheaper compared to the current level of infrastructure. And my point is that within the SADC community, we have somewhere around 50 to 30% disadvantage in terms of competitiveness to our products just because we don't have enough infrastructures going around within the space. It is said that between the port of Dar es Salaam and the port of Durban, which is the famous north-south corridor, you have only 1 border post where you can clear your cargo within or less than 8 hours. For the rest of the border post, you have to spend a day or 2. So for the private sector, that's a huge pressure point. And I think I'd like to commend some of the SADC members that are making very positive strides to build infrastructure in a way to connect our commodities to markets, in a way that is much more competitiveness to the countries as well, to the whole region. The leadership of Tanzania is quite commendable, 1,200 kilometers of railways being built within this particular country, and I think that's a very positive step. China itself is expected to build 6,500 kilometers of rail in this year alone. So when we see countries taking initiatives to make progress, I think that's very, very important for partners like us to commend. It is estimated that within the African region, we have infrastructure gap within the SADC region of somewhere around 450 to 500 billion US dollars. So as rightly as President Mkapa mentioned, we have a constraint of resources and we have to really think of our country on how best we can invest in infrastructure, because at the end of the day, the infrastructures open up opportunities for our product to be competitive within the market. The second bit that I would like to talk about is skills. I mean, education, having a very quality skilled labor force within the SADC region. The high quality labor force is estimated to be somewhere between 3% and 5%. So we still have a lot to do with our education system and our training to provide opportunities that are opening up with the development of the private sector. And it is an area where most businesses are finding hard to acquire good people and set up shop in particular countries. And I think it's a challenge to the Secretariat to work on the freedom of movement of people so that factors of production are able to move quite smoothly within the borders. The area of productivity is also one big challenge. I read a recent report that is yet to be published by the World Bank quite recently, which says that around 1961, the levels of productivity for African workers in Southeast Asia was pretty much the same. At around that time, the work that would be done by a US worker for around 60 days would be done by an African within a year. Today, that number is down to 31. So our productivity levels are going down while our population is going up. So it's one of the areas that we really need to work on and see how we can improve the quality of not only the education, but the productivity of our workforce so that the businesses within the community are able to use the available pool of resources to make a productive use of them. The third area is what I mentioned as savings. At the moment, the large amount of capital going to private sector is coming from FDIs, which means we source resources from a different part of the world to bring it into our own region and then lend it to our businesses. We don't have enough going around in terms of saving mechanisms to help us have enough resources within our country to give to businesses to do business with it. And that means our countries and our region needs to look at areas which can spur not only domestic savings, but also formalization. And I think the third phase government under President Mkapa did quite well, very solid initiatives like Mkurabita, which helped formalize resources and assets of the poor, which eventually they are able to commercialize them and monetize them and actually put them into savings, where business can actually get loans as well as credit at an affordable rate compared to the current rates of around 16 to 21% within the SADC region, which is purely unable to compete with a 1% loan in China or a 0% loan somewhere in Denmark and elsewhere. And my last point is the issue of fairness. And I think this has been touched in bits and pieces by presentations from everyone, and I think it's important to underscore it. And for the sake of sort of diplomacy, I will sort of draw similarities with the issue of Germany within the AU compared to South Africa within the SADC region. And not to say that we should prosecute our brothers for making headway, but I think that there is an important dialogue to be held with respect to fairness of economies as well as the private sector within the region in a way that encourages everyone to join into the opportunity that the SADC region provides. So Germany accounts for around 30% of the GDP of the European Union. It's the top trading partner for 18 of the 20 European nations that are part of the Eurozone. They lead in everything, I mean, not only in manufacturing, in terms of productivity, in terms of exports outside the EU and trade within the EU. And in some ways, the European Commission has a role to see how you can regulate and provide opportunities to other countries that are much smaller and have a different economic structure compared to what the dominant player has within that particular bloc. And this is a homework for us within the SADC region on how we encourage other member states through not only fiscal policies, but also monetary policies and other initiatives to make sure that we bring them into the board for them to enjoy the benefits that the SADC region would provide. So in the ballpark, I see a very positive future for the private sector within the region, a lot of opportunities with respect to infrastructures opening up, and I think that we're heading into a bright future with respect to private sector participation in the region.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to, there are lots of issues that have been mentioned here in terms of what needs to be done, and particularly drawn to the issue of relevance of addressing people's concerns and people's needs and making them understand what's going on. So I wanted to ask the current Executive Secretary of SADC, Dr. Tax, I'm sorry, I'm not putting you on the spot. I just want to find out if there is anything on the drawing board to addressing some of these issues that have been mentioned. Do you have a microphone?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Master of Director of Ceremonies, and thank you very much, Your Excellency, the former President, for that very insightful lecture, and all the contributors. But let me begin by saying that most of the recommendations which have emerged out of this public lecture, we are taking them on board. What was indeed, we are undertaking the review of both not only SIPO, but also the Regional Indicated Strategic Development Plan. So these are the issues which we are also to consider and see how we can improve. And a number of others which we are also presented. You wanted me to respond to the last part if we are taking them on board. We are taking them on board. In terms of awareness, that is it's a continuous process, but I think maybe from what we are hearing here is also to see how we can make it more effective. We have been doing that, but are we real like what the former ES said that 40 years ago, we are still asking ourselves the same questions. Is it SADC relevant to people? That is an issue which we need to ponder and see how we can address that one. But it is relevant to people because all the programs which we are doing are geared towards bringing socioeconomic development based on the vision which was very well articulated by the former president. But maybe even if we are undertaking all these activities in terms of infrastructure development, now the focus is on industrialization, and the industrialization is focused on 3 pillars. The competitiveness is one of them, industrialization is one of them, but also integration is one of the pillars. But are we doing enough, or are we doing the right things? Are we doing it in a timely manner? Are we doing it in a coherent manner? These are the issues which we are going to reflect on and see how we can address all these issues which are emerging more effectively. But indeed, we are addressing these issues, and we are happy to hear that, especially from the private sector, that they are seeing a bright future out of SADC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to end this session as we started it by calling on former President Mkapa to address this question, which is, as we all know, in 1964 in Cairo, there was what people have described as a big clash between 2 giant leaders of Africa. That is the late Kwame Nkrumah, then President of Ghana, and President Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, on the modality of integration, whether it should be an Africa must unite now, as called for by Kwame Nkrumah, or it should take a gradual approach, as was called for by Mwalimu Nyerere. And Mwalimu made such a strong, compelling case. Not only that, he carried the day, but also one scholar has said that he left the cause for African unity bleeding on the floors of Cairo. 50 years on, I want to ask former President Mkapa, with insight, was regional integration, this gradual approach, was this the correct approach to African unity? Could we have moved faster with the other approach as called for by Nkrumah? President Mkapa, please.
Mr. Moderator, you are determined to crucify me. I think Mwalimu was right Mwalimu was right, because the degree of realizing the imperative of uniting at once was not there. Actually, it might have driven us further apart. Now, what happens after so many countries have got their liberation? We started the Organization of African Unity. We thought we would strengthen it by changing the title from Organization of African Unity to African Union. And that, for me, is the real problem. We believe that exhortations are a substitute for concrete programs and their implementation and their review. We have underrated, for instance, the peer review mechanism. It is supposed to help good governance within the African Union. We send missions, they present their reports, but no concrete programs of reform or implementation ensue. I can't think of any, well, I don't know, ambassadors if we have known, but not in my time anyway. The result is that we are very good at formulating imperatives, but actuals, what to do, when to do it, who should do it, and how they are going to be funded, who is going to review the work, who is going to put even greater energy, how often should we meet to review this? That kind of activity is lacking. And that is why we have one summit after another, and in fact we have exacerbated the inactivity by increasing the activity of meeting. You have 2 summits a year instead of 1. So the other point is, we think that by structuring our efforts along the lines of the developed countries, such as the European Union and so on, we think that once we have those structures around, we have made progress. Structures are not a substitute for practical results. I think it is Simba, I think, who said that we must realize that these countries are different, both in the endowment of natural resources, in the history of their liberation, in the size of their populations, and so on. Meeting to take cognizance of that and evolve a common vision and a common program of implementation, a timeline, is not happening. It's not happening. And I believe that is the biggest challenge. And it will be a challenge even for SADC. I happened to be press secretary to President Nyerere when he was leading the Southern African Development Liberation struggle. He and his colleagues were the frontline states. If there was a major development adverse to the liberation struggle, or to the liberation wars, he would call a meeting of his colleagues, and his colleagues would leave everything, put everything aside, and come to meet within 24 hours. That is the kind of seriousness, the kind of passion, the kind of commitment that can produce results which will be noticeable and mobilize the population to be behind your development endeavors. That is something we must strive for. But otherwise, as I said, our people will see us as the political elites who meet very regularly, praise one another, issue documents, and say, "Sir, that's all." I'm sorry, I am being very blunt, but that's the way I see it. Yes, we are behaving like the European Union. What is the European Union in Africa? I'm sorry, anyway.
Thank you, President Mkapa. Now that will conclude this part of our conversation. Now, before we move on to call upon the audience to participate in the discussion, please, I want to recognize the assistance and the partnership of GIZ in organizing this forum, and also Azam TV, who are carrying this meeting live. So please, let's give them a hand of thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we are going to call on those who want to participate, to ask questions, to make comments, to make observations, to do so. I kindly request you to be brief and to the point, maximum, 3 minutes. I know there are lots of politicians here, so you can talk until, but please, we want as many people as possible to participate. But also, I want to call upon to encourage the young people, the young generation, those who are not born yet, as Terry was mentioning here, to also take part. So if you are a leader and you are young, please don't feel shy. Let's hear what you have to say. The older ones here are ready to take the blame, if there are any. Okay, so, yes. No, that way, Pale. And please tell us your name and where you come from.
Okay, good morning. My name is Stephen Kagbo. I'm the NIDO representative here in Tanzania. And thanks for inviting me to this public lecture. And thank you, Excellency. It's been a privilege to listen to the presentations. I have one question. And thank you also for underscoring the importance of Goal 9, which is industrialization and how it transcends, its relevance transcends the other SDGs. Your Excellency, you made a very important point about circumstances change with time, and so must our ways of doing business. The UN is undergoing a major reform, and I think that that statement applies to the kind of partnerships that member states of SADC expect from the development partners. So my question is, from any member of the audience, how do you see the business models, the partnership models between development partners and member states of SADC changing because of changing circumstances and many other factors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the lady. Yes, doctor. Yeah. Please stand up so they can see you.
Good morning. My name is Opportuna Kweka. I am a senior lecturer in Geography Department here at the University of Dar es Salaam. Mine is probably a comment or a contribution to what has been said. Recently, a friend of mine published a paper which talks about the Berlin cars in Africa, citing the Selous Game Reserve. And I actually want to ask some of the SADC members, are we not walking into the Berlin cars? It seems we are still assuming our borders, and many of you have talked about issues of peace, youth, indoctrination, lacking of indoctrination, or what I will call lack of a proper ideology, which has guided our forefathers like Mwalimu Nyerere in bringing peace and security, especially in most of the southern part of Africa. And my comment or contribution is that, can we pick one area where we can work and deliver? Because it seems that we can't do much. There's so much we can do very little. And one of the areas, for example, is the area of peace. If you take the Ruvuma Basin, which is running all the way from southern part of Tanzania to Mozambique, which are all countries in SADC. It's rich in resources, but again, it's suffering from what our colleague here has said. Is it negative peace, right? I'm glad that I learned something today. So there is Kibiti, and the Kibiti conflict is actually moving on to northern Mozambique today. All this area is full of gas, oil and gas, and also natural resources. Can we try to focus on pockets of areas where we can deliver? And that is one example that I think SADC can invest in and try to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I leave the Minister, Minister Dr. Augustine Mahiga.
Thank you, Chair. Let me express my gratitude to Uongozi Institute, to the University of Dar es Salaam, for organizing this very timely symposium on the margins of the 39th session of SADC. I want to thank Professor Mkapa very much, former president, for giving us insights into the dynamics of regional integration. I'm saying this because I want to recall, as a third-year student here at the University of Dar es Salaam, in 1970, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, came from the Lusaka Non-Aligned Summit with President Nyerere to Dar es Salaam. And President Nyerere encouraged him to come and speak to us as students at Nkrumah Hall. In those speeches, he started by saying, you Tanzanians have no idea how lucky you are by having Mwalimu as your leader, because he has a vision beyond the 20th century. And he said, we are coming from Lusaka to realize the last stages of Nkrumah's dream, which was seek ye first the political kingdom before anything else. He said, I think we have already got the political kingdom, but there is still the political kingdom agenda in Southern Africa. But Lee Kuan Yew went to say the future of Africa, the future of non-aligned countries will be in economic cooperation and beyond into economic integration. And what we heard this today is really realization of what Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew did forecast, how cooperation should translate into regional integration, and the dynamics of regional integration, the challenges of regional integration, and the opportunities of regional integration. But Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew went further and said, as you integrate, you'll find the necessary logic of having 2 or 3 regional integration groupings coming together. And the challenge is you may have the qualities, the opportunities for regional integration, but we have to go beyond. What does this mean? Today, Tanzania is a member of the East African Community. It is also a member of SADC. How do you synchronize and dovetail this kind of economic groupings in the developing world? But Lee Kuan Yew went on and said, then there'll be the South-South cooperation, which President Nyerere was one of the founders, and President Mkapa has been in Geneva to promote the South-South cooperation. So in other words, Lee Kuan Yew was saying, before cooperation or integration, you need political will. There must be constant political will. And indeed, he was vindicated because in 1971, at the Commonwealth Summit in Singapore, Obote was overthrown. And that was the beginning of the collapse of the East African community at that time. And that set in a trend of political discord between Tanzania and Amin and the rest, I think you know. So fundamentally, there must be continuous, consistent political commitment into regional integration. The second is, as we have SADC, we have the East African Community, we have ECOWAS, we have the African Vision. The challenge to you intellectuals and politicians will be how to synchronize and dovetail these various regional organizations into one bigger whole. And this will be not only an intellectual exercise and challenge, but also a policy challenge as we go ahead. But we must also look beyond, as Lee Kuan Yew said, that there has to be South-South cooperation, and to some extent, it also has to be North-South cooperation. In 1970, this was a distant vision, but today it's a reality. But among the challenges we have to face, Tanzania may set the example. We are members of the East African Community. we are members of SADC? How do we synchronize? How do we relate these things and go beyond to COMESA? And go beyond to the African Union 2063, now with the beginning of the African Free Trade Continental Area. These are things we must begin to think beyond SADC. There is also a fourth thing that Lee Kuan Yew said. I was interested in what he was saying because my professor, then Professor Jonathan Shamyarira, had given me an assignment to write about the East African community. Lee Kuan Yew said, what exactly said, that regional integration, apart from the political commitment and the dynamics of cooperation, beyond cooperation to integration, it must be peoples-based. If you look at all the regional integration schemes around the world, whether it's in Latin America, whether in Southeast Asia, whether in Europe, and now in Africa, the legitimacy of reaching out to the people and of going beyond saying, I like SADC because my president goes every year. We have to translate it to get it to the people. There must be accountability. There must be access to the people. And that is why, invariably, every regional integration scheme has a forum or some form of a parliament. How it works and its shortcomings and challenges is another thing. But in order to go beyond the bureaucrats, the elites, and to make regional integration and translate it into a people's organization, you need some kind of a political forum where people can participate, can challenge, can hold the leaders to account. And I think these are the issues that are now in the 21st century. And when Lee Kuan Yew said, Mwalimu Nyerere is a leader of the 21st century, we are beginning to realize that dream. And we all know Lee Kuan Yew was the author of the miracle of what Singapore is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you know, Dr. Maiga, like Minister Mwakembe, he also used it to teach here in political science. He left and promised to come back. So he has not yet come back. Well, yes, can we have a lady, another lady there? Please stand up so they can see you.
Thank you. It is such an honor to host this public lecture here at University of Dar es Salaam. My name is Ndombele Jacqueline E. I am studying here, but I am the vice president of the students' organization. I have my contribution. I heard from the presenters, the Honorable former President of the Republic of Tanzania. It was so impressive, and I thought I had to share something to these people around here. I heard, as SADC is inclusive, we have groups in the SADC region, specifically the youth, of which it has been spoken by a lot of presenters, but I want to keep my sight on the women, the inclusion of women in participation in SADC activities. Specifically, when you look at the region and the population in the region, females are of a large number. Then what is SADC doing to include women in the participation of the activities, specifically leadership and business or entrepreneurship? As we look at our countries, specifically Tanzanians, we find that women or females participate in these small businesses. What is SADC doing to make sure that they empower women or female in participation of, like, to bring development and progress in the integration of SADC? That's my contribution. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. That side, okay, there is a young lady down, up in the corner there.
Hello, thank you very much for this wonderful event. My name is Leticia Maganga, and I'm a recent graduate from a liberal arts university in the US. I majored in psychology and minored in medical humanities. My question is, what are SADC's plans as a community to reduce the dependency on foreign aid? especially right now there seems to be hints of a global recession, of a potential global recession. So how are we ensuring this sort of economic autonomy within the SADC community? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the High Commission of Kenya?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Excellency, for a very great presentation and speech, and the panelists for very engaging insights as well. My name is Ambassador Dan Kazungu, Kenyan High Commissioner to Tanzania. And in a way, I want to echo Waziri Mahiga's brilliant input, but I just want to go just one more around his sentiments. I think when you look at regional integration organizations in Africa, whether you're talking SADC, you're talking EAC, I think the two threads that I see that they should be people-driven and private sector-led. People-driven and private sector-led. And I'm just wondering, I think we've heard a lot about the focus on addressing the issue around people, so people can understand where we're headed. But this question should be going to the Executive Director, Dr. Tax, and I think in a way also to His Excellency Dr. Simba, and the young man who was born the other day, Mr. Terry. The question on the private sector-led initiative, I think we're grappling with those issues in East Africa, as you know, East Africa community, and I think it should be the same thing in the SADC. The issue is how do we start ensuring that the private sector do thrive, because we are focusing on the issues that are going against these virtues, these issues that ensure that private sector thrive because the environment is right. And His Excellency talked about it, President Mkapa talked about the issue of free movement of goods, people, services, labor. These things are important. It's important here in East Africa, they're important in SADC as well. So what are we doing to ensure that we address the environment, the business environment, the business climate, to ensure that the private sector do actually thrive, so that whether SMEs, whether medium business people can find or create work, and so that we can start mobilizing resources that Terry talked about, so that we don't rely on people or finances from other regions, but start creating our own pool of resources here to fight poverty and create opportunities for people. What are we doing about that? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mzee Butiku.
Thank you, Facilitator. I have only 3 points to make. First, to say thank you very much to His Excellency President Mkapa for a very good speech. But to agree with him that we are not yet really aware that we are free and independent as we started. I think this must be a priority. We fought our first round of independence because we wanted to get an opportunity to be self-reliant. That's exactly what we are not. And I think when we leave this place, we should take this as a priority. We have to work to achieve our economic freedom and our economic independence in order to make our political independence a reality. That's point number one. Point number two is what kind of education are we giving to our young people, our children? I think it's the wrong education. If you look around, you can see all sorts of university graduates, PhDs, medical doctors roaming around and saying they are not employed. And we have so many almost beggars in the streets out of our universities. So I want to challenge the universities and the leadership, vice chancellors and chancellors. What sort of education are we going to give to our people? to produce beggars in the streets. People have spent 17, 20 years in school, in colleges. They come out and saying they cannot employ themselves. I think this is a tragedy. So I want to agree with President Mkapa that we should actually look at the type of education we are giving. My last point is what the professor has said. All we do must be people-centered. Otherwise, we're just wasting time talking about ourselves, about these big buildings, and they have absolutely no purpose. So I thank Dr. Makoni when he started that SADC with the 2 C's were about people. I want to go to the grave thinking that the University of Dar es Salaam, SADC, AU, what is it? UN should all be people-centered. Thank you very much.
Yes, please, yeah. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Okay, fine. And then the other one. Yeah, Professor Luhanga.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm Matthew Luhanga. I'm Vice Chancellor Emeritus and a retired professor of telecommunications engineering. Not a tired professor. I would like to start my remarks. I'll ask 2 questions. My remarks by paraphrasing them with 2 things. First, we had an electricity breakdown here. Electricity is a technology of the second industrial revolution. We are now in the 4th industrial revolution, which was alluded to as 4IR by our colleague from South Africa. My second remark is I was touched by the final remarks which President Emeritus Mkapa made just a few moments ago. He spoke like an engineer. President Emeritus Mkapa talked about the digital revolution which is taking place and the fast pace of change which technology is taking and which our economies are taking. Now, my question to President Mkapa is, you know your colleagues. Obviously, this past change makes the knowledge you have now irrelevant in a short distance in the future. Are they keeping up in expanding their knowledge so that they cope with the changes which are taking place? I'm saying that because our colleague from the foundation, the second panelist, talked about the trading and infrastructure for trade in our region. COMESA, the digital revolution, leverages some of the digital technology to simplify the trading relationships between countries. So, for example, in COMESA, there is a digital free trade area. And out of the, it piloted at the beginning of 2018. Out of the 19 COMESA countries, 15 were agreed to pilot this new technology, digital technology. And out of the 4 which did not participate in the pilot, I read online and I was shocked. Tanzania was one of them. So are we keeping up in terms of our knowledge to be able to cope? And my second question is, the world, the Bretton Woods institutions are pushing on us neoliberal economic policies. Are we aware of the dangers of neocolonialism being brought about by the integration of neoliberal economics and digital technologies? Thank you very much.
See if former President Mkapa wants to address some of the issues that have been raised? Hapana bana. Naomba uzungumze. Okay. Okay, yule bwana katikati man, that guy there in the middle.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the organizer of the public lecture, the main speaker, former President Benjamin William Mkapa, and all panel members, even each and everyone in this room. I'm David Msabi. I'm a Tanzanian, a graduate of Governance and Regional Integration from Pan-African University, located in Cameroon. I have few remarks to contribute in this great event. The first thing, I would like to speak about the quality of goods and services that we are planning to manufacture, to produce in the SADC region. We would like to add that we have to make sure that we comply with the international standard organizations so we can sell our products all over the region. Also, in the same line, we need to harmonize the regulations and laws that's facilitating SADC to operate. When you move from here to Malawi, to Zimbabwe, to South Africa, you will not face any obstacles. Also, I need to add another remark on the side of agricultural. We need to shift from subsistence production to agribusiness, where we'll be able to sell and to have quality products. Also, I need to emphasize on the matter of protocol of tripartite for intra-trade. Also, this is very important because, as we see, we SADC, we are operating with the East Africa, we have COMESA and the other regional, even AU. So we need to make sure that we can provide proper mechanisms where there is a link between those organizations so as to remove some difficulties when it comes to the operations. The fourth thing is about feedback mechanism. SADC should put a clear channel to receive the feedback and from traders, investors, and normal citizens, ordinary citizens, because these are people who faces critical movements when they have their goods, the issue of finances. They need clear way to communicate direct to the SADC secretariat or whatever the platform will be established, so as the SADC will see the challenge which citizens face when they are in their movements with their goods and services, wherever they will be moving to. The last thing I wish to put into press is, I'm sorry, 1 minute. It's all about digitalization. This is the moment of fourth industrial revolution. We need to see how really our youth will participate in this kind of liberalization of our industries. For instance, I'll need to give you an example. I was among of the delegates who visited the 21st century industry located near to Krasin, opposite to Tanzania Ports Authority. We had some conversation with the managing director about the raw materials and the movements of goods. They face a lot of challenges, and most of the raw materials are imported from Asian countries, Russia, like maize, wheat. So this is an opportunity for SADC to use, to use a concept of comparative advantage. We should check which country in our region is able to produce maize and facilitate that country to produce maize, while the country that's able to produce tomatoes or any other kind of product should be given priority to produce that basing on the comparative advantage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But my last question.
That's it. That's enough.
Okay.
I'll go to the back. Nyuma kabisa kule. Yes.
Thank you. My name is David Mselewa. I'm a student from St. Augustine University. I would like to know, there's an Ebola outbreak in one of the member states in Congo. So I would like to know what measures or plans have been taken by the SADC so as to address this issue, because if it keep on spreading or outbreaking in other countries like Tanzania or Mozambique, we will be in danger. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, your next neighbor there.
Thank you very much. My name is Victoria Mwanziva, and I'm involved in research. My only question is, we've heard Dr. Tax and and Dr. Mahiga both say on the issue about integrating SADC to the grassroots level, to the youth. How best can this be done? How best can this type of integration be done so that the average person can feel and know and integrate in SADC? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Hafid Kido. I'm a journalist. We are all 330 million citizens of SADC. But some of us, or maybe few of in this house, they don't know the struggle our dear leaders have gone through to cement the SADC. So, Mr. President, after 16 years, you will be 96, I think. We are not sure that we'll get this opportunity to hear from you. In 1978, you had an opportunity to join President Nyerere to tour some Western countries to tell them about the SADC. I think they were not happy. Can you tell us the Nyerere Crusade for Liberation, that book we've been wrote, to tell what the answer you have been getting from them? Thank you.
Okay. Yes. In the corner there, yes.
Thank you. My name is Ibrahim Dabiru Msungu. I'm here as a participator concerning Uongozi Institute. First of all, I have to deliver great appreciation to former President Benjamin William Mkapa for his great lecture. My question is, how could ensure the sustainable development resources to our countries through regional community of SADC, rather than having the challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in the middle here. Au mpe yule amalizie. Mpe yule. Yeah, let him talk. Yes, yeah, that one. No.
Your Excellencies, a former President of Tanzania, Mheshimiwa William Mkapa. My name is Enoki Dot from University of Dar es Salaam as a student. Yeah, my point of concern is about the challenge facing SADC. As you can remember me, there's people who are the same age like me. When we are in primary level, we used to hear, or we used to be taught about the challenges about the issue of SADC. But up to the moment, we are talking about the same challenge. I think, or I thought that we African, that there is no any attempt of solving this challenge up to the moment that you will find people are talking about the same challenge, that no any attempt to solve this challenge, which are like a song to sing in front of the people. So here there is a contribution that I want to contribute. Due to the fact that these nations differ from resource endowment and the technologies, it is advised that there should be good mechanisms on how to ensure technological transfer so as to ensure that all the members of SADC are benefiting from this. Also, we should reduce the things called the barriers. You know, we as Africa, sometimes we are imposing the barriers that cause this organization to fail or to fail to implement their policies and the programs that they posed in their organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have about 10 minutes, so we'll use part of this time to request our distinguished panelists to say a few words to respond to some of the issues that were raised. And President Mkapa will speak last, so I will just start with the professor.
Thank you, facilitator. There are so many more hands. I was keen to hear more. But maybe the university should have an annual SADC day and have this lecture again. So you don't have to wait for SADC to do this. You do it yourself. Yeah. So a few quick comments. The first one on Ebola. It is the outbreak in the eastern part of the DRC. It's a SADC member state. But really the effects of Ebola is hitting Central Africa more than Southern Africa. And I think by now there's enough awareness amongst governments in the region and the international community, and particularly the World Health Organization, to take the necessary steps. In fact, there's a Congolese doctor who's developed a vaccine that seems to be very promising in stopping the effects of the virus. On partnerships between member states and international cooperating partners, ICPs, yeah. I recognize the importance of these bilateral and sometimes multilateral engagements, especially with the European Union. They're very important. But I would encourage that architecture to be modified to include the voice of the people in a structured manner, so that they can participate in the agenda setting of these partnerships as they develop every so many years. On peace, peace and security, or positive peace, there were some questions around this. Let me say there are two good stories to tell. The first one is that SADC is doing a lot to promote democracy or democratization, or even in some countries, the consolidation of democracy. And SADC is spending a lot of time and energy in making sure that our elections are free and fair. And where they are not, or found wanting, that mechanisms now exist to challenge and to resolve crises in a peaceful manner. It's a positive story. Secondly, I sense, but I might be wrong, that the overall governance architecture of the Southern African development community is evolving or adjusting. I might stand to be corrected by Dr. Tax later, but it seems to me that the SADC Parliamentary Forum is getting a new breath of life. And this would be the role of those elected members of parliament to exercise some oversight and also to make policy recommendations. It's an accountability mechanism, if you want, which I think SADC can do with. I also believe that the tribunal might be up and running soon. And together with the summit, which is the executive decision-making body, I think this bodes well for the future. In terms of positive peace elsewhere in the region, you know, I said earlier that I see the necessity for individual member states to undergo a process of security sector reform or transformation, if you want. Not imposed from outside, but on demand from inside. And Chair, if you will allow me to say, I'm speaking as a South African. I woke up this morning with the news that in Soweto Township, just next to Johannesburg, there were significant incidents of my people raiding the shops of foreigners. This is not the first time that this has happened. It sometimes goes by the name of xenophobia, the hate of the foreigner. It is a particular disease that we have in our society that needs to be addressed. It goes hand in hand with very high levels of crime. And so when I say security sector reform, I'm starting with my own country. We need to make an adjustment so that those who are meant to protect us from harm can do their job properly. And this thing of the hatred of the foreigner ties in with a sentiment that I hear in the room, which is our African identity and striving to recover lost ground. What does it mean to be a Southern African? What value set do you hold to your heart if you say, I belong to Southern Africa? These are the work that I think we need to do urgently, and I want to maybe conclude with saying that I think there's a way to do this. It requires some fresh thinking, but we have many thinkers in Southern Africa and intellectuals. Many of you in the room do that anyway. And I propose the idea of a social compact, which is an agreement between us in the region to rediscover the value of the mission of SADC. And so I want to see a room where we bring together in a discussion workers, business people, government representatives, and civil society. And jointly we can find that common voice that we are saying here in the room today we are beginning to miss. It must come back. If that doesn't come back, there's no real future for SADC. We'll be torn apart by the forces of change globally and continentally. So it's an urgent matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Terry?
One point I would like to make is that some of the forces, some of the economic forces that are happening in the world are neutral in nature, but countries have a decision to make and a positioning for themselves to make to see how they harness these forces that are happening within our global economy. And I think former President Mkapa rightly mentioned that when forces of globalization were looming around the SADC region, the decision was to integrate. And I would like to take that further to the point that His Excellency Dan Kazungu mentioned with respect to private sector-led integration. And I think there are opportunities to use the integration as a mechanism to harness the forces of globalization in 4 ways. One, there is an opportunity to have regional value chains, and I've read the SADC Industrialization Strategy 2063, and it takes good account of some of the value chains that could be made regional. And you would have a concept of, what we would take from our European brothers is made in Europe or made in Southeast Asia, where a certain particular product can be made by integral parts from different countries. And I think this is a very, very good opportunity to use trade and industrialization to bring people together, first as business, first as people, then how that percolates down to other levels of integration. But the second part, which is very important to achieve private sector-led integration, is movement of factors of production. I mean, in all honesty, we have stayed so much at the movement of goods for a very long time. This is 19th century concept. If we want to be a very modern integration, countries have to relinquish some of their willingness to have movement of factors of production. And President Mkapa has made a very good point about this in his lecture as well. Movement of capital. I mean, what about pension funds, excessive pension funds in one country investing in another country? And I think there's an opportunity to look at that as well. And same as with people. We are quite open to welcome foreigners and individuals from halfway across the world, and our neighboring doctors and teachers to come and teach in our communities. And I think this is one area where the private sector can really, really be a conduit to have a free movement of factors of production within the region. But the third part is the organization of the private sector itself. And we all know that it has not been in its best shape and form within the SADC region. Other regional integrations have had much more cohesive private sector structures, and I think SADC is also important to have a very a cohesive private sector structure. Southern African Business Forum was quite for a long time being supported by NEPAD, and now it is important for the private sector associations of member countries to step up. The same way President Mkapa mentioned about building their own headquarters, it is important now for the private sector associations of individual countries to show commitment and collaboration by pulling resources together and becoming much more organized, and actually use the opportunity that they have in the SADC structure to pull in their recommendations in the policy-making structures of SADC. And I think that's very, very important for the heads of state to somehow whip their private sector in shape to make sure that they are collaborating and actually being partners of government. The last point is the unifying infrastructure, and pardon me for repeating this point because I think it's very important. If we are building infrastructures to go to the port and export much more than we are building infrastructures that unify our hinterlands and our countries, we still become a disjointed region. We are much more closer to getting to Europe than to get to each other. So when I see bridges being built like the Kazulunga bridge between Botswana and Zambia, that becomes much more encouraging than a port that is being built in Walvish Bay, for example. So hinterland integration is very important. Expressways, as well as one-stop border posts that brings our people together and makes it easy for goods, services, and capital to move between countries is quite phenomenal. My last point would be sort of the usual statement that I'm supposed to say as a staff of the World Bank. Our commitment is to reducing poverty as well as boosting shared prosperity, which means we come in as partners to government as well to private sector in our countries to advise and provide financial support to achieve exactly these kind of goals that we have. And being a Tanzanian myself, it's quite a fascinating time to be here to have this discussion. And thank you very much, President Mkapa, for your exemplary presentation, and the Uongozi Institute for organizing this.
Thank you very much. Dr. Makoni, please.
Thank you. I pick on 3 points to reflect on. There was a question about how we restructure or structure our relations with the donors. The whole reason that the purpose of SADC in the Lusaka Declaration was economic liberation, towards economic liberation. In the Windhoek Treaty, towards a common future. Both economic liberation and a common future cannot be built on the resources of other people. It's not a matter of how much we have, as what little we have, we apply to our most important purposes. And I think President Mkapa's illustration of the, was it 500,000 or 50,000 for our headquarters, is more important when we build that 10-roomed headquarters with our resources than a 100-room headquarters with other people's resources. So self-reliance is key. And it's not just the self-reliance of our governments and government institutions, but the self-reliance of our people. That our people participate in this journey towards a common future. Second reflection is every venture has champions. Whether it is a football team or a liberation movement or an economic development venture, there has to be champions. I can share with you, during my time at SADC, if I had an idea I wanted to go, if it was taken by Mwalimu and President Samora and Prime Minister later President Mugabe and President Masire, I knew it would fly. This is not to say the other leaders were not important, but commitment and will are important, and we need to generate the 3-4 champions for our cause to advance and progress. The last observation is about our continuing engagement. I used to chide public officials during the time I was at SADC about what I called the on-off practice. As they prepare to come to SADC meetings, they put on their SADC hat and their SADC brain. When they land from the summit, they take it off. Now, we need constant, continuing, active engagement with the integration activities and programs for them to realize their potential.
Asante sana. Excellency, former President Mkapa, please.
I think my fellow panelists have made very good summary of our discussions. I have two pleas to make. One, if you set up an organization, you must be prepared to keep it alive, to give it the sinews with which to run the organization. I have not heard what the contributions are like to SADC from member states. I hope they are timely. I hope the commitments are manifest or they are not. But if they are not, that must be a start. Because if you can't enable these people, you will not enable yourselves to move forward. Someone has made reference to the fact that I have been chairman of the South Center, trying to promote South-South cooperation and helping each other. One of the problems I encountered there was that membership was easy. Everyone could join. But very few would make contributions to make the center work. There were about 5 countries who were very faithfully making their payments annually. There are others who have never made any contribution since the thing started. There are others who you have to cajole and cajole and cajole. But they are the ones who are most strident in asking for advice, for counsel, for knowledge, and for papers. So please, don't let our organization be like that. If we support it, let us support it with the sinews of finance as pledged. That's one. 2, in terms of the programs and the others, we must meet more purposefully, let me say, not just meeting for the sake of meeting. There must be as an issue that is truly demanding. And we go there prepared to address that issue so that it can stand out as a major achievement. But otherwise, we will have meetings for the sake of meetings, as Makoni has said. And that's not a mark of dynamism, let alone a promise of change or development. There, we must look to our leaders to show an example. He has said how they would get together, get an idea, send it to them, and pretty soon they will give an answer for you, and they will give you the capacity to carry it forward. I think our leaders should be meeting more often, more purposefully. And that purpose can be defined, of the meetings, can be defined by the Secretariat. They will not decide the real development programs, no. But they really must do. Otherwise, it will be seen not even as good as the African Football Confederation matches every year, you know. So if there's anything we are saying, let's put a plea to them. Generally, all of us, please let us recognize that we are Africans. Mwalimu addressed the parliament in South Africa, and he told them, you know, you must learn to be Africans also. You know, this is post-apartheid. You must do that. And that is the way the rest of the world knows all of us, not as Tanzanians, Zambians, or Botswana, or Angolans, no. He says, I go abroad to discuss matters of the South and so on. When I ask for questions, first one they tell you is, what is happening in Africa? I say, Africa, where are you from? He says, no, where do you come from? And you say, and he assumes that you come from Africa. He doesn't assume that I am from Tanzania. For him, Tanzania doesn't mean anything, but for Africa, it means something. So let's become Africans. Let us become Africans. It will be a major uniting factor for the success of cooperation and integration in this community. We can copy some of the institutions, cooperative institutions, economic institutions, educational institutions, philosophies out there. But they must be converted or used to advance us as Africans. And that is why I emphasize the point that, you know, we have all these resources, whether it's land, it's minerals, it's forests, it's waters. They are ours because they are on our territory. But they are really other people's because they are the ones who are exploiting them, who are developing them for their own interest. When I read publications and so on by African scholars, they are written as if we actually own these and we are making determinations on the way we'll continue holding on to them and deploying them in order to remove our poverty and strengthen our unity. But that's not the way the European Union is thinking, or the G7, or the G20. No. What is our attitude to that question of ownership and deployment of our resources for development? The European Union knows what they want of our resources. They produced the cooperative agreements, which I opposed immensely. Because they said, you have them on your ground, they may be yours, but we will take them. Tax-free, we'll come and put a value addition to them in Europe, and then we'll bring them to you, and to sell, and when we bring them to sell back to you, no taxation. So are these goods really ours or theirs? They are ours and still, but they are theirs. So I said, no, I can't accept this notion. Because it really means that we are working in order to keep your people employed and in order to enable you to come and exploit us even more with our own resources. So that's part of what I'm talking about, being Africans, owning our own destiny, owning our resources and deploying them towards that objective. As Mwalimu would say, it can be done, play your part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, former President Mkapa. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to end our session. I think we have been lucky and fortunate in having former President Mkapa as the lead speaker, keynote address, because he really proved once again that he's a real great chef, that he did serve us with mouth-watering, tantalizing hors d'oeuvres to start off the lecture. He reminded us of the mission and vision of SADC, that which we've been trying, or SADC is trying to strive for. Then he moved on very rapidly to the main cause of the meal, where he did emphasize the fact that SADC has been successful, I mean one of the most successful of the regional blocs in organizing and ensuring that there is peace and security in the region, that has, and provided stability. But he also did mention that it is, in terms of thinking, in terms of blueprints, it has generated several blueprints on infrastructure, on energy, industrialization, roadmaps. But these, of course, he reminded us, were just wishes. There are many challenges. There's poor integration, there is poverty, poor technology and technological deployment, poor infrastructure. the organization of the private sector, especially weak enterprise organization, weak networking, and so called upon many institutions, government, SADC itself, universities, and so on, to basically what you call to redesign the in-house competencies of many of these institutions. But he did emphasize the fact that we operate in a very fluid operating environment. We have intricate dynamics, and so he emphasized the issue of that we have mutual experience. You know, there is solidarity that has been generated through our shared history, and a remarkable leadership commitment that did result in your success in the liberation in the past, but that this must also be mobilized in the future and used to create synergies and connect and link with our people to generate resources and benefits for our people. And of course, he didn't mention it. People expect a robust, rigorous, people-centered SADC, and this has been also emphasized by other scholars. I think he did a very deep analysis of the economic situation from the global forces of globalization, the fact that there is positives and negatives. Globalization creates wealth, but it also generates poverty. It centralizes, but it also decenters. So what is done depends on, as I was saying, recognizing yourselves as African, taking advantages of opportunities that are available, and mitigating the negative impacts of industrialization. It did talk about industrialization, the right industrialization, creating backward and forward linkages with agriculture and other sectors, mobilizing, revitalizing the private sector, and thinking about the youth with the right education, the right skills, the right opportunities. Finally, he ends up with, again, very appetizing salads, and those are the problems. Initially, he mentions two, the investments, lack of resources, available resources being limited, and he generates solutions, raising more revenue, fighting corruption, mobilizing national financial institutions to do more than they're doing, but also the issue of ignorance of SADC. That too little is known. It's perceived, as was mentioned, as a club of leaders and their bureaucrats and so on and so forth. And of course, these are the themes or sub-themes that have then reverberated around the room, but also from our panelists. Dr. Makoni did enrich our understanding of SADC by a brief history of what it came from, a point earlier mentioned by the current Executive Secretary of SADC, Dr. Tax, but also emphasizing the issue of what he mentioned, that we produce what we don't consume and consume what we don't produce. I think this we met, I remember when I was in first year here at the university, in dependency and all that stuff, but still, it's still the same problem still exists today. People know little about SADC, and those we must be doing more. Dr. Terry, I think, was very good in talking about the private sector and what it must be, what it must do, the kind of challenges that it faces of infrastructure, high quality skills, fairness of economies, and so on and so forth. And of course, the professor did address the issue of peace and security, but also to remind us that we must not rest on our laurels thinking that we are good, we are safe, but there are hotspots of conflict, either real or latent. I did mention Soweto, but also some of the participants did mention the conflict around resources and so on and so forth, all of which must be addressed. So all in all, I think we came someone said, we came, we learned, and we will leave this room more knowledgeable and hopefully wiser. And so we thank all of those who have made this possible today. So let us please put our hands together. Now, I'd like now to call upon Right Honorable Nentumbo Nandi Ndaitwa, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for International Relations and Cooperation for the Republic of Namibia, and who has just completed her term as chairperson of the SADC Council of Ministers, to make the closing remarks. Right Honorable Minister, please.
Thank you, Director of Ceremony, Your Excellency, Dr. Benjamin Mkapa, former President of the United Republic of Tanzania, and in the interest of the time, with your permission, Your Excellency, President, can you allow me to say all protocol observed? Thank you very much. We have listened to the lecture, we have listened to the panel, and we have listened to the discussions. And I must say, I really don't know what I can say at this stage. However, allow me first to sincerely express my gratitude for being invited to make closing remark at this very important lecture organized jointly by SADC, Uongozi, and the University of Dar es Salaam, and to thank them all for inviting me and for organizing this timely public lecture. I'm saying it's a timely public lecture because deepening integration in SADC is what we all need, as that is the only process that will lead us to the full integration of the region and the continent. Thus, to enable us to address the challenges facing our people, which were clearly articulated here: underdevelopment and poverty. 2 years ago, I had a chance to accompany my president on a state visit to China. And when we were traveling to different places, we were meeting different people. And they were all behaving more or less the same. They were talking the same. And I said to them, what makes you to be just repeating, behaving all the time the same? And then they say, you know what is guiding us? First, we believe on the proverbs of our ancestors. And second, we believe, or we are being inspired by the founders of our country. And that is what puts us together. When that response was given to me, then I recall sometimes back, maybe 15 years or 16 years ago, I was one of those who were identified as Africa eminent persons to go and make an assessment on the operations of the Organization of African Unity, both its agencies, as well as its the Secretariat and all the organs. For 3 months, we were in Addis Ababa trying to understand. And what we concluded, we were 11 of us, is that unlike our forefathers, who have the founders or the founders of the Organization of African Unity, the current setup, we don't have a common clear denominator. And exactly we have put that in our report, and that is what President Mkapa is telling us today. That the Nkurumas, the Nyereres, had one common goal, and that is the total liberation of the African continent. Today, we were supposed to have a common goal of the total economic independence of the continent. Unfortunately, from the findings we did at that time, we are still in the process to identify that common denominator that can bring us together and make us to speak the same thing with one voice and to act the same at all times. And I must say, SADC as an organization is also part and parcel of the African continent. I agree that SADC region, we are privileged that our developmental agenda is built on a strong foundation and anchored in a principle which stem from the vision of our founders who were foresighted in their resolve for a better region and continent. Also, as already said by President Mkapa, our region has experienced a protracted liberation struggle during which we did not only share food and shelter, but died together, thus giving us a permanent oneness, and this supposed to make it easy for us to identify our common denominator as we stand here today. We all know that at the forefront of in calculating the spirit of integration, social and economic cohesion was eminent teacher Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. SADC, we all know, has its roots from Mulungushi Conference, the frontline states, and the Southern Africa Development Coordination Conference. It was already mentioned here. And of course, Mwalimu has played a central role in the regional formation, looking on how best we can work together to address the challenges facing our people. And all the liberation movements in Southern Africa have operated from Tanzania, a country that has even accepted to host the AU Liberation Coordinating Committee. I'm saying all this because unless we recognize where we are coming from, who did what, we will not be able to move forward with confidence. It's therefore not wrong to say that our connectiveness as a region and our continued pursuit for a more deepened integration were born in this country. And thank once again for the revolutionary leadership of Mwalimu, a true Pan-Africanist. who declared that Tanzania could not be independent if the whole continent is not liberated. In itself, for me, is telling us that regional and continental integration is a must. And we owe it to Mwalimu and his pair to ensure that what they stood for is realized. Namibia very much value regional integration as it's important in the expansion of the market, a factor in the area of economic growth and sustainable development. And this explains why Namibia has given land free of charge to all our landlocked neighbors to develop dry ports, thus making it possible for them to become land-linked countries. We are doing this because in our agenda of integration, where we talk about trade and investment, we are looking at the whole Africa as a continent. And the port of Walvis Bay is very strategic for trade between the Southern Africa, the Central, and West Africa. And that's why 2 weeks ago, we have to open the container terminal in Walvis Bay in order to enable us to move our goods for trade purpose. At the same time, we are engaging with our neighbors to make sure that all of them are connected by rail to the harbor, because currently all of them are connected by Tire Road. Your Excellency, I would like to agree with the sentiments that SADC is well positioned to share its key lessons with the rest of the continent, because surely since the establishment of SADC, much has been achieved. And I agree, in the area of peace, we are a leading region. And peace is a prerequisite for development. If you do not have peace, you cannot talk about development. So therefore, we have to be proud of that, because it's leading us to achieve the SADC that we want. In the same vein, we have a responsibility to ensure that we have to be more realistic when we take stock of what we have done and what we have not done. And I must thank the panelists who have been very open, especially to us who are in government. But time has come for us to tell each other the reality if we are to address the challenges our people are facing. Our current president, when he took over as a president of the Republic of Namibia, I'm now referring to Dr. Hage Geingob, he clearly said we have poverty in Namibia. And for that reason, he said we have to declare war against the poverty. Because if we do not accept where we are weak, we will not be able to address those weaknesses. I am sure many of our people, especially the drivers, they feel a sense of belongingness when they look at their driving license, which are written SADC. That's an achievement. But the question is, in order to enable the general public to feel the process of integration, they are asking a question: when will they have a similar identity or even a passport that can allow them to study and even do business in the region on equal terms? I singled out education and business because we are talking about the need of the necessary scale. The issue here now is for us, we are preparing ourselves to make sure that we implement all the protocols that we have signed, which are aimed particularly to look at the issue of the free movement of people. Your Excellencies, I fully agree, SADC has made good progress. For example, there are areas where we can really be proud. I want to mention the issue of energy, where we talk about the Southern Africa power pool. This has translated into a great direct benefit for our people through power sharing arrangements, which are able to balance energy surplus and deficit in the region. However, I agree. On the other hand, there are sometimes a tendency that national interest and sovereignty becomes impediment to our ability to move the regional initiative project ahead. For example, the issue of value chain has been on the card for some time. It was already mentioned here, the importance of value chain, as that's the only way we'll be able to have a balanced development rather than having product concentrating in one country where they are produced and the others become the receivers. And then jobs are created in one. And that's why SADC has developed an industrialized strategy in order to address those issues. Now we have identified potential value chains in the region which have a specific focus on combination of how our individual and regional strategies can be leveraged for optimal benefit from both regional and global value chain. This approach specifically allows us to profile the sectors in each country and develop the strategies for value addition, beneficiation, and downstream processing. It also allows us to have a vested interest in promoting investment in the regional project, as we are able to reap collectively benefit for all people in our region. Your Excellency, the third summit of SADC heads of state and government was held under the theme Infrastructure Development for Youth Empowerment for Sustainable Development. And it was at this summit where Namibia became a chair of the SADC and I became the chair of the Council of Ministers. We agree on this theme because we believe that as we forge ahead with our development agenda and regional integration, our youth must be on the forefront. It's very unfortunate when we see African young people rescuing their lives, trying to cross the oceans with the hope of a better life. In fact, I call it, they are following their jobs that we have transported to other continents. When we are sending unprocessed raw material, we are exporting jobs. In fact, Africa is a net job exporter. And that is what SADC would want to bring to an end. And that is why the theme that focuses on the youth empowerment and infrastructure development in order to enable us to develop the necessary skill. On my arrival in Dar es Salaam this time around, I was highly impressed by the pace at which infrastructure development is taking place. And this speaks to our goal of regional connectivities and enhancing our collaborative ability to facilitate the free movement of goods and services as foreseen in the SADC Free Trade Area. Again, this is one of the areas in which our region can contribute and benefit to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area once it becomes operationalized. SADC has also made good progress in the area of women empowerment. I know my executive secretary was ready to give a response or a reaction because this issue was raised. We have made good progress in the area of women empowerment. Particularly, we have agreed that it should be a standing agenda item in our agenda so that every year we have to receive progress. Where we stand now, women are playing a major role both in the political and the economic field in our region. If we look at women representation in the SADC region in parliament, they are the highest in comparison to other regions. In Namibia, for example, we stand at 47% in our National Assembly. And this has also become possible. It has also become possible when SWAPO, the ruling party, has taken a decision and put it in a constitution that the Secretary General of the party is here. We put it in the constitution to have 50-50 women representation in all party structures. And because our National Assembly election is proportional representation, when we send our list, it's a zebra list. If the first is a woman, the second is a man, and it goes like that. Again, because of that, our top four, which is the president, the vice president, the secretary general, and the deputy secretary general, are 50-50. For example, our current president of the Republic of Namibia, Dr. Hage Geingob, is also the president of the party. Then the vice president of the party is the one talking to you. Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa. And then the secretary general is a woman. The deputy is a man. And we also decide it should be 50-50, not necessarily a zebra. Because if you make it a zebra, it will mean one gender will only be deputizing. You understand? Because if you have a man, the president, the vice president will be a woman. The secretary general will be a man. And then the deputy secretary general, a woman. So we say it's 50-50, but not necessarily a zebra list. However, when it comes to others, it should be a zebra list, because otherwise it will not work. So that's how we are featuring in as far as women empowerment is concerned. However, colleagues, we still believe that there's still much to be done. We have not yet reached a fully gender equality. And that's why we are saying, as we continue to harmonize our legislative and policy framework to create opportunities for our citizens and create an environment that enables easier transaction and facilitate intra-regional investment, we should not overlook to have specific programs focusing on women and the youth. Your Excellency, let me conclude by saying there are several positive developments in our region, and I'm hopeful about the future of our region. And when I listen to discussion this morning and this afternoon, I am even more encouraged. When I see the young people who are the ones who are calling for SADC to be closer to the people. Minister Mahinga, it's a challenge to us. And we are saying the forum that can bring the SADC closer to the people is the SADC Parliament. We know in our countries, whenever I attend a meeting like this, I go home, I have to make a report to Parliament, and it's a discussion. And that is how the people will come closer to what we are doing. So I think our people are challenging us to speed up the process of transforming the SADC Parliamentarian Forum to the full parliament so that it can save them. I look forward to more initiatives of this nature. The professor has already challenged to say that have more discussions. That is very important. We should not wait for SADC. The brain is in our region. The people are closer to us, and they are ready to come anytime. Let us make use of them in order for us to learn and to create strategies that can help us to address our challenge. Because that's the only way we'll be able to have a baton that we can give to the next generation of leaders that will be based on strong foundation. Allow me at this point to once again extend my sincere appreciation to you, Your Excellency, President Mukapa, for the significant role played in laying the foundation for our regional growth and development. I should not leave this podium without expressing how happy I am to be back at the University of Dar es Salaam. I know this hall looks new because I'm seeing it for the first time. But during my 6 years as a SWAPO chief representative in East Africa, based in Dar es Salaam, that is in the 80s, I have been a frequent visitor to this university. Because almost every year, I have been invited to give a lecture to first-year students at the Department of Political Science. There might be some who can recall it, but this has been my place. And I was really sincerely happy when I saw the invitation that I'm going to participate in this lecture, because since then, I never came back to the University of Dar es Salaam. And today, I'm given an opportunity. And I'm really happy to see it's still dynamic, it's still the same university, and I could see the product when the students and those who passed through here, including our executive secretary, expressing themselves and articulating issues. Thank you very much for bringing me home. Once again, to organizer, thank you for invitation, and I'm sure many have learned Africa is our continent, SADC is our region, and no one can make a difference but only ourselves. We can cry of hunger, we can cry of poverty, but the solution is with us and nobody else. No one can liberate you. You have to liberate yourself. I thank you.
May I request that we give Her Right Honorable another round of applause for such in-depth closing remarks. We are nearing the end of our program today, and Your Excellency, former President Mkapa, can we ask for your indulgence to have a short session of group photos? May I now request our panelists to stand up and move behind the chairs. And may I now also request your Right Honorable, together with Dr. Tax and Dr. Mwakiembe and Professor Anengisia, to come and take your seats again. We will have a group photo session that will include groups that I will call here. While they take their seats, we will have the panelists, then we will have the ministers and PSs and former government leaders and the deputy ES. And then we will have members of the diplomatic community that are here today. And then we will have leaders of political parties and religious leaders. And then we will have heads of institutions and representatives of CSOs and private sector. We will have leaders of student organizations, especially leaders of Tahliso who are here. We will have the members of the UDSM management, and then we'll finish with the organizing committee. So can I have the panelists please stand closer to the official photographers? Please take note, we're starting the photo session now. Thank you. May I ask the panelists to remain standing there? You will be joined by ministers and permanent secretaries and former government officials and government leaders who are here. And the deputy ES. May I please ask you to join for the group photo? While they are going for the photo, may I ask members of the diplomatic community to get ready? They will follow after that. And then we will have leaders of political parties and religious leaders after the members of the diplomatic community. Okay, thank you very much. May I ask you to exit through this door? Thank you. And then may I ask members of the diplomatic community to take that route and go behind the high table? Okay. While members of the diplomatic community are going for the group photos, leaders of political parties and religious leaders who are here, please get prepared. Thank you. While they're taking the photo, may I ask for the heads of institutions? That includes Tanzania institutions from the government of Zanzibar, as well as any other that are here, including representatives of civil society organizations and private sector organizations. Please get ready. You will enter the podium through that side, stand behind the high table, and then you'll exit on this side. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, may I ask you to exit through this side? The photo session that follows now is leaders of political parties and religious leaders. I take it they've already taken their photo. Can I now request the heads of institutions and representatives of CSOs and private sector? Heads of institutions, representatives of civil society organizations, and private sector representatives. Please join the podium. Good. Thank you. After this group, representatives of Tahliso, please get prepared. Tahliso and other student body representatives, please get prepared. Please exit on this side. Thank you very much. Tahliso, please make your way to the podium or through my left-hand side. The official Uongozi photographer, please kindly take note of these photos. And then we will have the University of Dar es Salaam management. Students, please make your way quickly up here. Okay, these are student representatives. Let's see. You have been commended for the comments that you made and the questions that you ask, indicating that we have hope that our region will continue to be vibrant. Thank you. May I ask you to exit on the left-hand side. Please use the left-hand side exit. Now I request for the members of the UDSM management.
Foreign Affairs, GIZ, SADC Secretariat staff, and some UDSM members who are part of the organizing committee. After this, we have the organizing committee, so please be available. Thank you. Please exit on my left-hand side. Use the left-hand side. Organizing committee, it's now your turn to take a group photo, and this includes Uongozi Institute, UDSM, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, GIZ. Thank you very much. We have now finished the photo session. May I ask Your Excellency, former President Mkapa, together with the distinguished high table, to please stand up and then move. You will come through this. Please exit through my right-hand side. Karibuni huko.
Awali gani kulele pale?